Welcome to the 5th episode of this new series where we test different handguns and see how well they conceal carry. This week we have the PSA Dagger Compact. In this video we're going to touch on topics like comfort, concealability, and the effectiveness of this handgun. At the end of every video in this series we give the gun a final rating so you guys can compare it to the other videos in this series. So jumping right in, how well does this setup conceal carry? I think the first thing you need to look at is actually going to be the holster. Here we're running the T-Rex Arms sidecar. I have quite a bit of experience with the original 1.0 sidecar. This is the newest 2.0 sidecar. I've used sidecars in the past with the original 1.0 and a few with the 2.0. I really like the 2.0 system. It also conforms to your body, which is going to make it a lot easier to conceal carry. You're not going to have nearly as much printing. If this was rigid like the 1.0, sometimes mag extensions would print. We don't have that issue with this holster. One thing to keep in mind here is T-Rex Arms sent this holster out for free. We are not sending them this video early. They did not pay us to say anything specific. However, we want to thank T-Rex Arms for supporting the channel and allowing us to review this setup. I have a lot of really good things to say about this holster. We had a few issues that we'll talk about later, but when it comes to concealability, this thing does a lot for you. Like I said, this pin is going to make your mag extension really easy to conceal. This big wing that T-Rex has on here is going to push the gun into your body, making it easy to conceal carry. And one thing that actually surprised me, I did not know about this holster, is you can move the attachment up and down with this pin here. You can see we have it in the middle. We can move it up one or we can move it down one. What this allows you to do is adjust your spare mag attachment up or down if you're running a mag extension or a stock 15 round mag. So if you're running a smaller magazine like this +2, you can see it sits a lot lower than the +5 did that was flush with the back of the gun. What's awesome about this is if you are running a flush mag in your spare mag, it's gonna allow you to get it up higher to perform a reload easier. If this was sunken all the way down in here, you'd have a real hard time getting a grip on this mag and performing an accurate reload. On the other hand, if this mag is too high, you're just gonna print. Yes, this system pushes it into your body, but once you sit down, this is gonna fall forward a little bit, and anything that is past the back of the gun here is gonna start printing. So one thing I noticed right off the gate is this was sitting a little high for a mag extended mag. Yeah, I think it was sitting high so that if somebody was running a flush mag, it would be flush with the back of the gun. So we lowered it to allow for this +5 mag extension. I actually did not catch this on the first video we did with a 2.0 sidecar. So it was a really nice surprise allowing us to drop this down. Talking about this system, this is a modular system. So T-Rex has a lot of attachments you could throw on here, like a cuff carrier if you're undercover cop, or a rifle mag carrier, which I thought was kind of cool. I think they even have a suppressor sleeve if you wanted to do anything with that. I think it's really cool that T-Rex did this, that you have that adaptability and you can adjust it to whatever your needs are. So jumping into some of the issues we talked about, I found that the retention on this holster is as loose as it could possibly get without this wing falling off. It just seems like it's a bit tight for this handgun. So with that being said, we found that this wing will come completely loose and that the gun will loosen up dramatically. It will go from really tight to really loose because the bolts are basically falling out. One way to fix that is you could Loctite this. I think the real problem is that PSA's tolerances might be a little bit off and T-Rex is trying to account for this. If you look at it like a scale, I wish T-Rex would have shot for the middle so that you could tighten or loosen that washer a little bit rather than being all the way at one end. Again, this might be the Dagger that we have and it might just be that it's slightly bigger, causing us to not be able to tighten down these washers as much. We did notice this with the spare mag as well, and this is a Glock magazine. This retention screw would loosen the more reloads we did. So halfway through the range day when I would draw the gun, this would be so loose that it would just flop out. So that is one thing to keep in mind. I would recommend Loctiting these once you get them set where you want them. That way this thing doesn't kind of just rattle itself apart when you're using it. But that being said, the holster we got for the Hellcat, we could just loosen this retention a little bit. It did come set rather tight, but it had the adjustment left to loosen it up. And the screws did not loosen over time. It stayed rather tight. And I think it just comes down to the Dagger itself. We manufacture accessories for this Dagger, like the compensator and the magwell, and we found that the tolerances are kind of all over the place. So when it comes to the rating for concealability, I really enjoyed carrying this gun. It concealed pretty well. I actually carried this gun with a +2 mag extension in the gun instead of a stock 15 round mag, and it concealed pretty well. So we're gonna give it a 7.5 out of 10. I think that's very fair for this setup. Overall, this gun is a rather heavy and big setup, but in general, it was a pretty good experience, so that's why I gave it a 7.5 out of 10. When it comes to comfort of a setup, it really comes down to the size and weight of the build. When it comes to the height of this build, we are looking at 9 inches high and 8.25 wide. So compared to the Hellcat coming in at 8 inches wide and 7.75 tall, I would say it felt bigger, but it really didn't. I didn't notice the size of this gun too much. What I noticed was the weight. This gun felt significantly heavier than some of the other guns we've carried, especially comparing it to the Hellcat. So this setup weighed 3 pounds and 10 ounces, whereas the Hellcat only weighed 3 pounds. So I honestly didn't think 10 ounces was gonna make that big of a difference, but it definitely did. I think I can pull some of that weight off if I ran a stock mag. You would lose 2 rounds and the weight of a magazine extension. But in general, I think most of that weight is coming from the TLR1 and the larger slide. So when you compare it to some of the other guns we've reviewed, it is just a little bit heavier of a setup. If you've ever carried a Glock 19 with the TLR1, it's basically gonna be the same thing. There's not a huge weight difference between the Dagger Compact and the Glock 19. So when we look at the different pants setups I was wearing during the 7 days, the weight of this setup was very noticeable, going from the jeans belt setup to the jogger setup. With the joggers, I just noticed the weight a lot more. There was a lot more sag. This gun felt heavier. And I think it just comes down to that jogger belt setup is just not as rigid as the Core Essentials belt. But in general, I just felt a lot more comfortable carrying that setup, and it was one of the sacrifices I was kind of willing to make. It honestly depends on how you're gonna be carrying the setup. If you're gonna be doing a lot of sitting or driving, I think the joggers are a phenomenal setup for that because the comfort's there. But if you're gonna be standing up or walking around a lot, I just preferred the jeans and the Core Essentials belt. It was a lot more rigid. It took the weight off my hips a lot more than the joggers did. With carrying the joggers, I found myself having to kind of hike my pants up occasionally. So the weight was kind of at its limits for the joggers. When carrying this setup, I thought it was incredibly comfortable with both setups. I had the gun sitting at the standard ride height, so I did not adjust it. This is how it came from T-Rex arms. Typically, I found with the T-Rex arms, I have to move the whole gun down a little bit in the waist. I did not have to do that with this one. It felt very polished. When carrying the setup, I did not notice too many hot spots other than the light when sitting. When standing, it felt very comfortable, very flush up against my body. But honestly, during these 7 days, I did a lot of sitting at work. Sure, I would get up and down and walk around, but most of my day was sitting at my desk, and I just felt that the joggers were slightly more comfortable than the jeans. However, on the weekend, I was out doing things with my family, and I just felt that the jeans setup felt a lot more comfortable, felt a lot tighter up against my body, and I didn't feel the fatigue of the weight of the setup. The way I see it is 99.9% of the time, it comes down to the comfort. If you're uncomfortable when carrying, you're just gonna stop carrying. I think the joggers do a really nice job bridging the gap and allowing more people to carry a full-sized handgun because it's gonna be more comfortable. And if you're more comfortable, you're probably gonna carry. A side note when carrying this gun, the grip texture was very soft on the Dagger. I did not notice it very much when carrying either the joggers or the jeans. And honestly, I kind of wish PSA would have made this a little more aggressive to help the effectiveness score. But when it comes to concealed carry, I did not even notice the grip texture on my stomach. Over the course of the last 7 days, I noticed while driving, I could feel this gun a little bit. It was not quite as comfortable. However, when you wear the joggers, it's gonna be much more comfortable. So getting into the car wasn't too bad. Wasn't a lot of binding. We're in a bigger vehicle. We're in a Tahoe. So if you were in a tiny car where you had to get down into it, you'd probably feel a lot more discomfort. For me, it really wasn't too bad. Driving, not really noticeable at all. I do feel a little bit of pressure where the weapon light is, but honestly, not bad. I could probably drive like this for 45 minutes to an hour before it became uncomfortable, maybe even longer. Honestly, pretty comfortable for being a full-size handgun. This is, again, a comfy, bigger vehicle. I think if we were in a car, it'd be a lot different situation, and it might be a bit of an issue if you were really crunched up. For this section, we typically talk about exercising while carrying, but going forward, we want to transition to a more broad approach, testing various physical activity. As for activities when you're gonna be crunched down, picking things up, or climbing a ladder, this setup performed really well. I did not notice any pinching or binding. This part of the holster wasn't digging into my legs when I would completely bend up, climbing a ladder, or picking up boxes. In the past, I've had to shift my T-Rex holsters over so that 12 o'clock was in line with the slide. In this case, I found the perfect carry position to be 12 o'clock on the pin. That would allow me to bend down, pick things up, and I really wouldn't have any binding or pinching. So this honestly kind of surprised me with how big this setup is. With a TLR1 on a Glock 19 size handgun with a compensator, it was rather comfortable. So giving this gun a score on comfort, I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10. The reason I ranked it so high as a full-size gun is it just felt very comfortable. This entire setup felt very refined, and I think T-Rex spent a lot of time working on this Glock 19 style holster, and I think it definitely shows. Everything seems to be in the right place. I can be very flexible, it holds its weight really well, and it hides the gun really well. So comfort was not an issue, and I think a lot of that has to do with the kit and the grip texture on the handgun. So now let's talk about the gun and how effective I can be with it. Overall, I performed really well with this gun. It's very similar to a Glock 19. So with that, I have a lot of experience shooting a Glock 19, which kind of carried over into the Dagger setup itself. With this being similar to a Glock, it actually uses a Glock trigger Here we have an aftermarket Gen 3 factor trigger. In my opinion, this is infinitely better than the original PSA Dagger trigger, and that trigger would have definitely impacted the effectiveness of this handgun, so we had to throw that in there. To improve accuracy, we threw a dot on here. I can just perform better with these and be more precise. The HGDG Herrington Arms compensator is going to reduce quite a bit of that recoil, allowing me to shoot faster and be more effective. On the bottom, we have the Herrington Arms Dagger magwell. This is going to help quite a bit with reloads. On the front, we have a Streamlight TLR1. This is going to be really important for seeing in the dark. In my opinion, this is one of the more important accessories you can throw on a carry gun because we spend a lot of time at night, especially this time of year where it gets dark sooner. So seeing your target is gonna make you a lot more effective, obviously. We have to throw on the Cogworks slide release. This is gonna help a lot when you have a high and tight grip. For me, I found with stock slide releases like the PSA Dagger or a Glock 19, I will actually hold it down so I won't get slide lock, and occasionally I'll even hold it up where I'll get slide lock when shooting. So it's incredibly important to not have those two issues because they're really gonna impact your speed when shooting. And as I mentioned earlier, I am running the Herrington Arms +2 mag extension in the gun. I feel like it added capacity without sacrificing concealability. And on my backup mag, I am running the Herrington Arms +5 mag extension. This is one of the reasons I chose to run Glock magazines, is so that I could run extensions and get more capacity. And last but not least, we have an aftermarket mag release. I think it's the Tribe mag release. This one is very aggressive, and I might change it out in the future because of how sharp it is, but it performs a lot better than the original one that is on the Dagger. The original mag release on the Dagger, you have to bottom all the way out to get the magazine to release, and this one is extended so I can reach it easier. This is gonna really reduce the time it takes to perform a reload, so in my opinion, it's definitely important. So going over what this gun feels like to shoot, if you've ever shot a Glock 19, shoots very similar. The low bore axis on this handgun feels very comfortable to shoot, and the compensator on there reduces a lot of that recoil. So I can shoot rather fast, almost as fast as my P320 build, which is rather impressive. This gun has a really soft recoil impulse, and it reduces a lot of that muzzle flip with the compensator. With those two things, you just increase your effectiveness with the handgun. Ultimately, the flatter the gun shoots, the faster you can shoot, and that's one of the reasons why we got into making compensators, is it gives you a leg up, and it's gonna allow you to perform a little bit better if you're an experienced shooter. All right, so what I really like about this drill, this is the blender drill. It allows me to put emphasis on the core components of this gun, focusing on the optic, the trigger. The magwell helps a lot here, keeping my hand nice and tight on this gun. Jake, where'd you find this drill?
So, if I'm not mistaken, this drill originates from JJ Rakaza. I learned this when I took a class with Donovan Moore of .1 Tactics. To me, this is a perfect drill. If you run it at speed, you're definitely testing your grip sights and trigger. Obviously, we're working target transitions here, so drag-ons, drag-offs. If you're new to a dot or you're trying to build the speed and build your vision behind a dot, I think this is an excellent thing to go with. Absolutely.
So overall, shooting this gun, it feels very natural. It's exactly what I expected out of the Dagger. It shoots just like a Glock 19. So when it comes to the effectiveness of this handgun, it's gonna score pretty high. Another thing that's really important to effectiveness is capacity. On this setup, we are carrying 37 rounds, 17 in the gun, 20 on the spare mag. The more capacity, the better. It's never a bad thing to have more ammunition on you. It is going to increase the weight and potentially decrease the comfort. For me, I found this is the perfect balance. Adding a little bit of weight increases my effectiveness and allowing me to carry more ammunition. It's definitely worth it. And finally, some notes on the holster as it pertains to the effectiveness of this setup. We did not have to adjust the ride height in the joggers, which made this a much more universal setup. I could switch between the jeans and joggers universally, and it was just a lot more comfortable and it took a lot less time. The reason this is important in the joggers is because it makes the gun easier to get to. A lot of times we found with joggers, the pants waistline will sit right here, and it makes it kind of hard to get to the gun. Leaving the holster as it was sent to us from T-Rex sitting a little bit high gave us enough clearance to easily grab the gun and perform a really fast draw time. So obviously that is going to impact your effectiveness with the joggers. But it seems like the T-Rex holsters give you plenty of clearance here, which makes it a lot easier to draw. You're not afraid of bashing your knuckles off the wing or the holster. And as I mentioned earlier, I can adjust this spare mag height, making it much easier to perform a reload. So that is going to make reloads a lot faster. One thing we noticed with the Tier 1 holsters is if we did not run a mag extension, this mag sat very low. So I can really appreciate that T-Rex Arms broke this off and gave you that adjustability. So if you run a mag extension, you can perform a reload much faster. Anyone who's tried to reload from a mag that sits really low in the holster understands how hard it is to actually perform that reload quickly. To give this a score on effectiveness, I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. The reason I'm doing that is I can just shoot this gun very well. It shoots very similar to a Glock 19, which I have quite a bit of time with and I feel very comfortable with. So I can be very effective with this gun. So with that being said, this brings the final score to 24.5 out of 30 for this entire setup. Honestly, I think that's very fair. This performed pretty good across the board. I can shoot it really well. It's very comfortable, and I can conceal this pretty large handgun without a lot of printing. So it's pretty impressive, and I can definitely tell that T-Rex Arms spent some time refining this specific holster. If you guys want to see more information about this dagger build, check out our last video we did on the channel, and we'll give you all the details you need. If you guys like this video, we'd appreciate a like and subscribe. We'll see you next time.